film begins 6 days after the events of the previous part when Joel, haunted by the smile demon, finds the home of dealers. He waits for one of the brothers to drive up to the house, pulls a mask over his face, and, threatening him with a gun, takes the guy hostage. The guy tries to intimidate Joel, but Joel shoves him into a room where the second dealer is sitting. Joel reminds them of the crime they committed together, but they only laugh at his threats. However, Joel pulls out a knife and kills the man, hoping to rid himself of the curse. His brother immediately shoots Joel, wounding him, but he himself dies from Joel's bullet. Since the witness who was supposed to inherit the curse has died, Joel begins to panic. Just then, he hears noises from the next room and finds a drug buyer begging him not to kill him. Joel apologizes to the guy and steps outside, only to be caught by the dealer's accomplices. He manages to escape through a side exit to the street, where he is hit by a car and literally smeared across the asphalt, leaving behind a trail resembling a giant bloody smile. Sometime later in New York, pop star Sky Riley arrives for an interview with Drew Barrymore. Despite a successful career, Sky has issues with substances and alcohol and is still recovering from a car accident in which her boyfriend, actor Paul Hudson, died. The host asks about the new tour Sky plans to start, and the singer talks about stress and illness. But now that she has returned, Sky apologizes to her fans, loved ones, and team, promising this will never happen again. Sky recalls the despair that led her to tear clumps of hair from her own head, but says she has learned to control her life. After the show, Sky, accompanied by her mother, Elizabeth, leaves the studio and takes photos with the many fans waiting for her outside. Later in the car, her assistant Joshua shows her skyrocketing ratings. Sky is inspired, working hard, and hoping the upcoming tour will help her return to her former glory. However, during a rehearsal, she suddenly feels severe pain in her back. The choreographer is concerned, but Sky assures him she just stumbled and that it will pass soon. She refuses a break and continues the rehearsal with determination, but later she experiences intense pain and decides to dull it with strong painkillers. She pulls out a pill box just as someone knocks on her door. Startled, Sky drops the pills down the sink. Behind the door is Elizabeth, who reminds her that the group is waiting. Sky hides her pain from her mother, but in the car, it becomes unbearable. She then receives a message from Louis Fragoli, a dealer and former classmate. Telling her mother she's going to sleep, Sky calls a taxi and heads to Louis's place. However, when she arrives at his apartment, Louis grabs her and threatens her with a sword. Panicked, Sky pleads with him to put down the weapon, explaining that she came for medicine. Besides, he was the one who invited her. Louis checks her phone and, finding the message, drops the sword, though he doesn't remember sending it. He cries, trying to explain that he's stressed because something is haunting him. Scared, Sky decides to leave, but Louis begs her to sit down, promising to calm down soon. He goes to get the medicine, and Sky notices a TV report that reminds her of last year's tragedy. She turns off the screen and calls for Louis, but he doesn't respond. Sky heads to the bedroom, where a deranged Louis suddenly jumps out, forgetting he invited her. He collapses, choking on his own tongue as if he's seeing something terrifying. Sky tries to bring him to his senses, but he suddenly smiles in a strange way, staring directly at her. Sky falls to the floor, crawling away as she watches Louis pick up a weight plate from a dumbbell and starts smashing his own face to the point where skin starts peeling off. Eventually, he collapses and dies, and Sky flees his apartment in terror. She returns home, feeling like she's in a twisted world, and immediately grabs a bottle of water to compose herself. Suddenly, her comb gets stuck in her hair, and as she yanks out a clump, she feels a slight sense of control. She lies down to rest, but the fear and anxiety soon wake her. Sky examines her surroundings and sees the bloody figure of Louis, but as soon as she turns on the light, the vision disappears. The next day, Sky resumes preparations for her tour, trying to forget what happened. She has a fan meeting today, and as makeup artists work on her, her mother reminds her of her best friend Gemma, whom she has distanced herself from since the accident. Joshua also offers advice, which irritates Sky. Just then, her longtime fan Darius enters and asks her to perform at a charity dinner for his foundation for troubled teens. Sky pretends to be pleased by the offer. Later, she participates in a photo shoot, then opens Gemma's contact but can't bring herself to call. Suddenly, she feels as if someone is in the room. Sky looks around, but nothing is there. She stares into the mirror and is horrified to see the bloody reflection of Louis behind her. Suddenly, his hands grab her face, stretching her lips into a smile. Sky screams and swats him away, but then sees only her own reflection in the mirror. She tries to gather herself as her mother, Joshua, and a costumer enter, having heard her scream. Sky Sky blames it all on the costume, saying she doesn't like it and refuses to wear it. Later, she rehearses on stage and then signs autographs for fans. One of them, Alfredo, behaves overly aggressively, grabbing her and saying he wants to peel off her skin. Security escorts him out. Sky returns to the fan meeting, where a little girl silently approaches her, smiling widely. Sky tries to talk to her, asking questions, even signing her t-shirt, but the girl walks away, still smiling, which unnerves Sky deeply. That same day, she receives an anonymous message from someone who knows she was at Lewis's house. Nervously, she pulls out a clump of hair and calls Gemma. Sky leaves a voicemail apology, and her friend immediately calls her back. Sky invites her to come over. To pass the time while waiting for Gemma, Sky sits at the piano and starts singing. Suddenly, she hears the sound of shattering glass. She looks around and sees a broken water bottle. Sky goes to get a mop and finds a t-shirt she signed for Alfredo, as well as his belongings, including stained underwear, scattered across the floor. She thinks Alfredo is standing at the end of the dark hallway, about to attack her. Terrified, she rushes to the door, where Gemma meets her. Gemma doesn't understand what Sky is afraid of, and Sky looks around, seeing the water bottle intact on the table. Sky hugs Gemma, surprised to hear she called her an hour ago. She reaches for the water bottle again, which concerns Gemma, but Sky explains that it's her therapist's advice. Water helps her realize the situation is under control. Sky apologizes for past mistakes and tells Gemma about the incident with Lewis. After listening, Gemma agrees to stay the night. Suddenly, Sky sees herself in a wrecked car. Her face is bloodied, her leg broken, and she's in immense pain. Beside her lies her boyfriend Paul's body. Sky cries for help and wakes up in her bed. She shares her thoughts with Gemma about the darkness she felt within herself long before the car accident, and her friend calls her a horrible person. Sky calls out to her, but Gemma gives her a demonic smile. A car horn sounds, causing Sky to fall off the bed. When she stands up, she hears her friend's voice saying she's already up and has made breakfast. Realizing she's late, Sky panics as Elizabeth enters, scolding her for missing rehearsal. She hurriedly gets ready and goes with her mother. Arriving, she apologizes to the group and after warming up, steps onto the stage. They perform the routine, but suddenly, Sky sees Paul's image in front of her. Immediately, she feels excruciating pain in her broken leg and collapses. Sky accuses one of the dancers of throwing her off balance, but the choreographer, who watched closely, saw no such thing. Furious, Sky storms into her dressing room, but finds it trashed, accusing Joshua. Elizabeth points out that Joshua has been with her all day. A tense argument ensues. Elizabeth reminds her that they all took care of her after the accident, and now she owes it to them to ensure the tour happens. Sky begins to realize how strange she must seem to those around her. In the evening, Sky attends Darius's charity event. Standing backstage, she receives yet another anonymous message about her visit to Lewis's, smudges her lipstick nervously, and steps out to the audience. While reading a greeting speech from the teleprompter, the text suddenly stops, and Sky improvises a small speech that turns into a personal monologue about her struggles with substances. The teleprompter resumes, and Sky, not thinking, invites Paul Hudson onto the stage, shocking the audience. She then sees Paul in the crowd, smiling and approaching her. Sky yells at him to stop smiling. An elderly lady nearby tries to help her, but Sky sees Paul and her and shoves the woman off the stage, horrifying the crowd, before fleeing. Returning home, Sky keeps receiving messages from an unknown number. The stranger knows what she sees and feels. He sends her a video of Lewis's documented experience with the demonic entity. The stranger invites her to meet him in a public place, and Sky, wearing a plain jacket, heads to a cafe where she meets a man named Morris. He explains that his brother also fell victim to the creature, which forced him to tear his own jaw apart. Morris tracked events among other victims and found Lewis's body, retrieving Sky's number from his phone. By studying the path of the smiling demon, he concluded it's a parasite that won't leave a living host. To rid herself of it, Morris suggests stopping her heart. As a medic, he can kill her and revive her after the entity exits. Sky rejects this idea and tries to leave, but fans in the cafe recognize her, trying to take photos, praising her action with the elderly lady. Sky flees. At home, she tries to relax but can't find any substances or alcohol, angrily ripping out a tuft of hair and trashing her apartment when her dancers appear before her, smiling as they surround her. They chase her, corner her, attack her, and rip out her hair. One guy seemingly sticks his hand down her throat, causing Sky to lose consciousness. In a daze, she remembers the night of the accident. It turns out she and Paul were under the influence, and Sky was to blame for the tragedy. In the morning, Sky wakes up in the hospital, undergoing examination after being found unconscious in her apartment. She begs Elizabeth to cancel the tour, but her mother reminds her that this would end her career and the record label would sue them, costing millions. When Skye accuses her mother of caring only about money, the entity appears before her as Elizabeth, forcing her to shatter a mirror, injure herself, and gouge out her own eye. Skye runs to the door, finding a shard in her hand, her robe soaked in blood. She sees her mother lying dead and tries to flee, but Joshua notices the blood on her clothes. Doctors and security try to help her, but she grabs a guard's gun and, threatening them, escapes. Outside, she meets Gemma, forcing her driver at gunpoint to hand over the car so she can go to Morris. Gemma insists on driving, but along the way, the real Gemma calls Skye, as the entity has been posing as her friend all along. Skye screams that she won't let it control her and convinces herself that the demon is only in her head. She suddenly finds herself at the wheel of her own car. She meets Morris at an abandoned pizzeria to perform the heart-stopping experiment. He leads her to a freezer to preserve her brain, lays her on a table, and prepares an injection to stop her heart. Exactly 8 minutes later, he will inject adrenaline to revive her. Skye confesses she's doing this because she ruins everything good, destroying the lives of those around her. As the process begins, Morris leaves the freezer, and the entity appears before Skye as herself on the night of the accident. It attacks her, stretching her lips into a smile with its thumbs, but Skye bites off its fingers, grabs a syringe with medicine, and injects it into her neck. But the entity laughs, declaring that this isn't reality, and advises her to tear everyone apart. The next moment, Skye finds herself on stage. Elizabeth is alive, in the crowd with Joshua and Darius, among hundreds of fans. Skye sees the monstrous entity emerging from her body before crawling into her mouth. She collapses in front of her fans, but then rises and smiles. Then she begins smashing her head with a microphone until she breaks her own eye socket as her fans watch in horror. The second part of the horror about the smiling demon impresses with its visual effects, excellent cinematography, intriguing music, and the actress's performance, though of course the film remains an acquired taste.